It's time to get to work, so I want you to roll up your sleeves. If you have any to roll up, I'm kind of a short sleeve guy myself. We're going to apply a drop shadow. Not really a lot of work, but there are a couple of reasons you do things in Photoshop to attract attention. And I don't want to just show you a drop shadow. I want to show you the best way to do a drop shadow to grab my attention. What do? Well, we have this button down here. Remember one thing. You cannot apply any layer style to a background. It must be a layer. Come over here, click Drop Shadow, and the button is right here. Say, Andy, I forget the button's down there. Is there another way to apply a drop shadow? Of course there is. If you don't want to do it from here, go up to the word Layer on the pull-down menu and go down to Layer Style, and there they are. Either place, go to Drop Shadow. In Drop Shadow, you're treated with a nice big dialog box. You have all your other styles over here. We can work all day long on this one object without going back and forth. We're just going to deal with a drop shadow. I have the preview on, which means I can actually see the drop shadow over here. The blending mode of the shadow, not the layer, is multiply. That multiplies the shadow into the background. If the background is not a solid color like ours is, it'll make it look more realistic. So it's a good idea to keep that on. If you want to change it, go ahead, try something else. The color of the drop shadow is black. That's not always what you want to do, but if you want to change the color, you click that button and change it right here. Opacity is 75% by default. Drop shadows you can see through. But if you want it less or more, change the option. Here we go. Angle. The angle. The best angle for a drop shadow to get my attention and make me feel comfortable. So you're kidding me, Andy. No, I'm not kidding you. 125 degrees. The default is 120. So you can see I've used this before and I've changed it. Why 125 degrees? What's going on here? We look at objects from the upper left and come down to the lower right. Magazine, brochure, whatever. The shadow is going down and to the right, which to my eyes is the more natural way for the shadow to drop. 125 degrees, write that number down. Global light, what's that? If I leave that on, which is the default, it allows me to do anything else, like for example, a bevel and emboss, it's going to use the same light of 125 degrees. If I turn that off, and there are reasons why you might, then you could do different angles for the light source for each thing that you do. And we'll leave that on. Our distance, and again, you can watch it over here. Notice to a certain extent, the more I move the distance, the more we perceive the word drop right here to be further away from the background. We know logically that's a flat surface. Go ahead and put your hand on the monitor and rub across it. Our minds are cueing to what they see on a two-dimensional surface to what they have lived with all their lives in a three-dimensional world. And the more we do distance, the more it looks like the word drop is pulling away from the background. Spread and size kind of go together where we can soften it up if you want to. I would say that the further away the perceived distance of the word drop in this case is from the background, the more blurred the shadow would be. The closer, the more distinct. So we can do distance, spread, size. Size is kind of like the Gaussian blur. We have a quality area here that starts with contour. It's kind of fun to work with. If you click this button, you get these different contours. If you click them, you will notice how it changes the drop shadow. And if you're going for more of a surrealistic as opposed to a real look, you might try some of these. Let's go back to this one, which is normal. Anti-aliasing helps smooth it out. Noise. You want to add a bit of noise to it, go right ahead. Layer knocks out drop shadow. What's that? Has to do with fill options. Let's do this. Click OK. The fill option on a layer removes the fill but leaves the style. If I come over here and move this and move it away, you will notice that I see what's left of my drop shadow. I also see the word shadow. It's knocked out. Layer knocks out. Okay, you get it? Let's move this back so we get 100%. Let's double click right here to get it back. Turn layer knocks out drop shadow off. Click OK. Now watch what happens when I do a fill. It doesn't knock it out. It leaves the drop shadow. That's what that option is. So double click again. It's on by default. A lot of times that's what we want. We want to look like it's knocked out to create a different impression. But if you want the drop shadow and not the word drop shadow, turn it off. You like what you did here? You're tired of coming back constantly and making changes? You can make this your default. Or you can reset everything to the defaults when you first got here. We can even, we'll talk about this later, make a new style. You click OK. Basically, you have a drop shadow with a bit of noise on that image. Remember the 125-degree rule on drop shadows. They're comfortable, they're easy to look at, they make sense to my eyes.